personality. I didn't like that type of game, which I think has a lot to do with.
Hi guys.
Enjoy it that much.
Hi.
Yo, what's going on?
Hey.
How's it going?
Welcome back.
Welcome back. In the chat, can you guys hear anybody? Can you guys talk? Can you say things?
Hey.
Hey. Hey.
Or would you
It's
be
your
lucky
boy.
if you couldn't hear us?
Ooh.
How's it going, everybody? Oh my gosh, everybody's here already. Holy.
Yeah, they're all
Oh my
here.
goodness.
They're all here. Well, good.
Everybody's here.
That's crazy.
So, just could you hear us while you were doing the other stuff?
I couldn't. I
great.
muted you for the sole purpose of just being able to do what I needed to do.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it would is it worth bringing up on stream?
I'm just gonna message him to do it if he hasn't already. So here.
All right.
We were brainstorming.
So, anyways, welcome to SEAL Team 7, guys. Today I am really excited to have some new guests, people that I've been aware of and been part of the community for a while, and then all that stuff, etc. Hold on, I'm getting directions from on high that I should change the tag instead of talk shows and podcasts. Better for rando viewership. Interesting. That's a good idea.
That was all me, obviously.
It's a great idea. So, okay, guys, welcome to SEAL Team 7. I've got two guests that I've known for a while and been aware of for a while and been really excited to have on. We're going to change the tone of the shows a little bit moving forward. We had 3 shows that were basically us just like reacting to Intergrade and theorizing over the ending, and there's going to be plenty of room for that. Don't worry. Pez is coming on, and, so that'll happen. But I would like to have a little bit more focused conversations, and today we're going to have a little bit of a focused conversation on a few select topics, and I chose my topics according to my guests and my guests according to my topics. And so real quick, I'm just going to do some introductions, and then they can introduce themselves a little bit. I'm going to start with Lully Bunny, who has been not only streaming a lot of content, but Final Fantasy content is definitely a big focus, but also has a YouTube channel where she's done some pretty good breakdowns of some interesting Final Fantasy VII related topics. She's definitely kind of more centered around OG lore, which is more than welcome here. So let her introduce herself to you. Go for it, Lully Bunny.
Hi, well, I'm Lully. I usually play RPG and indie games on Twitch. I've been trying to get into making more analysis and lore-focused content on YouTube regarding Final Fantasy VII. It's been my favorite game since I was 14 years old, so that's over 15 years now. And yeah, I'm obsessed with these characters. I love the themes, and I'm always looking for new things to talk about with other people about it.
Thank you, and obviously we will push the heck out of anything anything that you have moving forward, and we will have links to your YouTube on the VOD. So if you guys don't have access to that immediately, stay tuned, and we'll get that to you. And then we've got Sleepezi and coming in clutch on the chat. So Sleepezi, speaking of. He's a known theory crafter and detail analysis expert. He is known for such things as finding a grievous miscast in the famed Rockstar game L.A. Noire and some other stuff. Do you want to tell us about yourself, Sleepezi?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Clark. Hey, everybody. Sleepezi here.
It's your boy.
It's your boy, Sleepezi. I make Final Fantasy VII content. I'm mainly known for the Structure of 5 video series, which you guys can check out on my YouTube channel. And I do stream Final Fantasy VII content as well as other games as well. Currently working on a new video. Very excited to have that out soonish. But yeah, as always, just glad to be here and also to be talking to some new friends. So thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, you kind of have a rotating seat on here and everything. I mean, we're just trying, but we're happy to have you here. We're just trying not to bring anything up that's too jarring. Etc.
No Roche loving. Yeah, that's definitely not me. I'm definitely not obsessed with that character. So sorry for anybody who doesn't get it. It's fine.
DM me afterwards if you want the whole context. It's hilarious and very.
I have my hands.
It's very worth it.
You can only get the backstory if you're on the Patreon.
Yes. Yeah. Tier 3 subscriber only detail.
Tsunamods coming in clutch for that right there.
I'm a streamer too. I know how this stuff works.
Hey, speaking of liking and subscribing, I do consider you all do that for all of us whenever you feel like it. I mean, more them than me, because I've got to appear humble in order to maintain this, facade of being a mender of the community. But in all seriousness, the people that I have here make excellent content, and I want you guys to enjoy that. And as lame as it is to spread that part of the business, it does really help them if you support them and however you can. So I'm really excited to have the legendary Tsunamods on with me, and we've been in each other's radars for a while. Not only is he just do everything about everything, he's responsible for the coolest current mods for Final Fantasy period. I was just going to say Final Fantasy VII, but that doesn't do what you do credit. And in addition to mods, he's found some really cool lore details. He's very familiar with the story of Final Fantasy VII, and he's even he's shown me little details that have blown my brain straight out my ass. So it's been a really cool thing just to know this guy, let alone now he's on my show, teaching me how to do things. It's crazy. Tsunamods, take it away.
Don't really know what to say after that, but yeah, my name's Tsuna. I'm full-time content creator for FF7, but in a bit of a different way to most people is that I create mods for FF7. If you've ever played modded FF7, chances are you've used a mod that came from our team. I'm not solely responsible for everything, but the mod we're going to be most known for, and probably are most known for already, is our Echo S mod, which is fully voice-acted. Every main character, minor character, NPC, cat, dog, chocobo, it's going to be voiced. Maybe not the cat, dog, and chocobo part, but you get what I mean. And the official crane here in the chat is the director for our
hey,
Echo
good
S
to see you
project
here.
too.
Good to see you here.
And yeah, the last time we showed up on a podcast, we announced that we had started working on Echo S for Final Fantasy VIII.
Ooh.
Which got some excitement. Yeah. I'm also jealous of Baby Seal's microphone because he has the upgraded version of mine.
Yeah, sorry?
Do you?
Yeah, you got the HyperX Quadcast S, right?
Yeah,
It changes colors
yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Well, my cat dropped my last one. She knocked it off the table and it just broke into a million pieces. So
Now you have to stand, so it can't.
My cat is pretty creative. My cat has a creative ability to destroy things, so it's possible. If any cat can do it, it's this cat. So, anyways, thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it. And it feels weird having when we say we create content, I'm kind of talking about Sleepezi and I, we just make videos and talk about things we like about the story. But you create content, you're game could be better. Here's proof. So, we really appreciate that. I'm, some of the vocal performances that are in the Echo S project too, are quite frankly superior, to the existing cast, and so that's really cool that you've been able to pull those people together with such a cool and iconic project.
Yeah, we've got a surprising amount of YouTube comments saying that they prefer our cast to the remakes.
That's awesome.
I don't know if
it's so
true or whether they just don't like the remake and they'll say anything, but either way, I take it. So
there's a bit of that, yeah. There's a bit of just of just kind of directional hate, but I think also it sounds really good, and that helps a lot. So, so the topic that we're going to kind of talk about is on the screen here, and it's one of the most prolific fan theories. Is sort of front and center here, and it's the old Marlene is a Cetra theory, and it's one of those ones that. I mean, I remember seeing in on acforums.net back in back in the olden days, when the internet had just started, and we had to entertain ourselves with forum posts and stuff like that. I remember seeing that theory, and one of the things that I think Remake really leaned into was that there's something special about Marlene, and you actually brought something to my attention, Tsuna, that I think really kind of illuminated the mystery around Marlene. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to discuss that here on stream here with everybody.
I can. I'm just looking for the picture here because I'm using the virtual cam, I can actually pull it up on my camera and everybody on stream can see it if you want me to do it that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously as a modder of FF7, one thing I'm capable of doing is, I have friends in good places that are able to get me files from the remake and whatnot, and I import the remake models into the original game. It's not for everybody because, different art styles, but when I was messing with them, one thing I found was that I got curious and I looked into the dog tags that Barrett wears. And I took a picture of them and I showed it to everybody. And I believe, actually, let me turn on my second monitor here. So that I don't want to change my screen and then you just see OBS over and over again.
It's cool to watch you work, It
still surprises me that anybody watches me do anything. I feel like 75% of my content is just
I think a lot of us feel like some degree of imposter syndrome whenever anybody says anything.
So I don't have one specifically just for the thing, so it's got my layout here too. But as you can see in place of my camera, I took the textures from the remake Barrett, and the top one, if we zoom in a little bit here, the top one says Barrett Wallace / male, December 15th is the birthday, the year is just XXXX/0. And I'm assuming at this point, because there's a phone number at the bottom, there's just a bunch of X's too, that X in this particular scenario just represents we didn't know what to put here. And it says Midgar Avalanche lead. But then Marlene's one, which is below here, says Marlene Wallace, female. But instead of just putting X's for her date of birth, they put unknown/unknown. And there's got to be a reason for this, because they could have just put XXX and, we wouldn't have questioned it. But why would they say unknown?
Right. So
That just
they're
doesn't make sense.
making a specification that we don't know it, because like that we don't have
Yeah.
the clear picture of her origins.
I'm
That
also
is-
thinking that with it saying December 15 and then the year and then it says /0 on Barrett's, I'm thinking the 0 is actually an O, and that's the blood type. And it would also explain why unknown/unknown from
Right.
Marlene. So it's saying
Is
we
they
don't
don't
know
know her
date of
blood.
birth, we don't know her blood type.
Yeah.
But I find that hard to believe, honestly, because Barrett and Dine were best friends. Dine has daughter. He's Uncle Barrett, right? Like, that's just the way it is. How does he not know her birthday? Blood type, I get it. You don't just ask your friend, oh, what's your kid's blood type? That's weird. Birthday? Like, something's wrong there. Something's messed up.
That is weird. That's
actually a really good find. It's funny, not to like go off on a tangent here, but one of the things that one of the one obsessions that I have with Final Fantasy VII story is Avalanche and how that's structured, especially in regards to like how Remake is, with some changes, or maybe not, some new branches, all this different ways of categorizing the like Barrett sector, which we kind of already figured was the case, but then like the old guard and all this other stuff. So I have myself, like, not in the level of detail that you just presented, just to almost piggyback off of it. You can read the tags on his neck in the artwork, in the render of it. I can't, but it doesn't show Marlene's. So
right, you can only see the top one.
Probably
so
for good reason.
Exactly. So one of the funny things about this is that, and I joke about this with Clark all the time, is that as soon as a PC release, or people like you who already have your hands on certain details of that, I'm always just like, this game's gonna just start leaking out like all sorts of different information once we are able to like get some of these things out, or at least start looking at them. One of the things that I've had to do since starting my channel and researching is that I actually had to start looking into like models and like at least viewing models and stuff like that. So I looked through, I think, most of Crisis Core's like models myself, but as far as like Remake is concerned, I've only had like a handful of people be helpful with that stuff. I have a Falna's model, which I was looking at for like patterns and stuff like that. So I think that like just being able to see something like this, it's like these are the beauties of the game sort of coming full circle here, where it's like we might not have ever even had this sort, because again, like this theory has lasted for ages, and just to have like one new thing about that is such a great find. So it's insane that you even found something like this. It's super cool to see.
Like, I've built my own sort of scenario around the whole thing, but I don't want to throw all my eggs in one basket immediately. It's like, I would have no problem sitting here just talking for hours and telling you everything at one go, but nobody else would get a word.
I have those sorts of things myself. That's the church for Aerith for me, is like, I just try and stay as far away from that subject as possible, just because it has its rabbit hole there and all that other stuff.
I've been seeing a lot of that recently.
Fountains too.
Part about it is that it's now a point of conversation for a lot of people, and I'm just like, I don't want to. It's just me, but not to say that we can't. But it's just one of those things.
It's like, if we've got time at the end here, there's one thing I'd like to bring up that I mean, you've probably spoke about it behind closed doors, but no videos I've seen so far have brought up this one thing that I've noticed, and I want to talk to someone about it.
Yeah, say it.
Maybe we have time at the end.
Say it, and then we can all chime in.
If you want.
Wait, you want to do it now?
Why not?
I mean,
okay. I was just thinking, like, you guys are the hosts. You listed the topics. I don't want to just take control of your podcast.
It goes all sorts of places all the time. So
fair enough.
Oh yeah.
Fair enough.
All right.
Yeah. So like I've seen. I haven't done too much theory crafting myself. I've watched other people's theories and then deviated slightly from what they've said. Like, I've seen the whole cross thing. I've seen that people are saying, Zack is in fact dead, and everybody there whispers, and they're dead too, or whatever else. But the one thing that I haven't seen anyone mention is that during one shot of that scene, just before it zooms into Zack's face, when he walks in, he opens the doors, you look at the church. There's nobody stood in the flower bed. The very next scene, you can see the boot and the bottom of the trousers of somebody in Soldier. Nobody's mentioned this anywhere. Did anybody else see this?
I definitely missed it.
No, it does. It looks like he's looking directly at somebody that's looking back at him, and it's a boot, and it doesn't match any of the other clothing that you see in that scene. It's part of the reason it's framed so strangely. It doesn't seem like he's reacting to it. It just seems like he's responding to the lack of Aerith. It's a weird. It's a very weird scene. Yeah.
Like, if there was actually a soldier stood there, Zack would have burst. Like, he wouldn't have gone black screen, and then he would have said Aerith. Like, he would have said whoever that is. Like, I'm sort of thinking if he is dead and this is heaven and whatever else, or the live stream, that's probably Angeal. But he would have said Angeal. But if it's not, then, like, what is it? Is it going to be Roche? You know?
I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay if it was Roche. What are your
confirm to us if he's dead or not, right?
Is it at all possible that it could just be like a third or second class soldier, just like a rando?
I don't know. But what's weird to me is that there's no time frame between the first shot and the second shot.
Yeah,
he doesn't exist, and then camera moves from over here to over here. Suddenly he's there. You see his leg. It's like he just manifested out of nowhere.
Huh. That's so strange. I definitely did not notice that, so I'm gonna have to go back and watch.
I'm looking at it right now, and it definitely looks strange. I'll say that. But the fact that he says Aerith right afterwards is even more confusing to me now.
Yeah, right.
Because I'd be like, hey, like who are you looking at, or something. I would say anything else except her name.
I think the safety assumption here is it's Aerith dressed in a soldier outfit.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty much for sure confirmed. You heard it here first, guys.
Alternate universe theories. You know, I mean, when you're on top of the church in the original after you escape, and she's like, "Oh, they're hunting me because they thought I was a good candidate for soldier." I mean, alternate universe, she joined soldier. There we go.
Can you imagine?
I'm having a flashback to watching, I think, Terminator, the not the most recent Terminator movie, but the one that came before it, and then the girl who plays that character in Game of Thrones comes in and saves the main character, and she's like, "Come with me if you want to live," and it's like, oh my god, like the person who is like in the dark in the original movie has now become like the badass soldier and is like prepared for everything. I'm having like flashbacks to that movie because it's like Aerith, Flower Girl, Cetra to now.
Well, we got Natalie Portman as Thor in the next Thor movie. You know, like
I'm excited for.
It's just you got to get on the train. You know, you gotta put your finger on the pulse and then just ride it out.
The idea of that soldier being Aerith dressed up as a soldier, obviously that's something I've just pulled out. It's funny, haha, good joke. But when you really listen to the way he says Aerith, he doesn't really say it in such a way as if, like, oh, Aerith? You know, where are you? It's as if he's actually looking at her and she doesn't make sense to him. He's questioning her, like, Aerith? You know, that's actually the kind of way he says that line.
You're not wrong.
Like, what are you doing?
You're not wrong. He does say that.
Weird.
I mean, if it ends up being that, I can't imagine anybody being upset.
Yeah.
I'd be like, well, being like, I told you so.
I am absolutely joking, chat. The world would collapse on itself. It would be like The Last of Us 2 times 1,000,000 if that's what ended up happening. But
for one, welcome first class soldier Aerith.
I would actually be like, all right, well, look, that, like, first of all, first soldier to wield the staff. Let's just be honest. She's sticking to her. Dude, if she had her own, like, Sephiroth type of sword, like, not like the beefy long, like, Sephiroth sword or the thick cloud, like, essentially like machete, like, what would her weapon be? at that point.
Maybe it's going to be like a lightsaber. Not like so much where you go boom and it cuts things, but you have your handle, it's got a button on it, you press it, and the staff just pops out.
Sector 6, chair, thank you. Finally.
The chair, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
but the button would, something magic related.
Like, honestly, it is a little bit irritating that there are 0 female members of Soldier. Other than, like, Deep Ground. Like, Rosso and Shulk are basically it, right? That we know of?
There are lady, like, rando soldiers, and they're,
Right.
like, they got all their thigh out. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, Deep Ground has a different aesthetic look, too, for sure.
Yeah.
All over protection. As a
Yeah.
Played
There was
FF9,
that-
like, come on.
There was that time Lightning got Cloud's outfit in Lightning Returns.
That's true, yeah,
It was
yeah.
DLC, yeah.
Yeah.
It's lightning. That's who's standing there.
That's
In
it.
Japanese, they are voiced by the same person.
That's true. That's true.
Well, thank you guys for coming out. This is Team 7. I would be down for that. For some reason, I was like, all right, if this is the rail we're off on, we're off the rail.
Whatever. That's good. It's good.
Dude, Elf would be great, Maverick. I just want that character in general.
I know.
Pretty sweet.
Elf.
What a turnaround that'd be.
I think we'll see. I do think we'll see Before Crisis references in the
already
next
have.
game. Yeah, like character references, like full blown, like Cisne level character references. So, personally, but so let's just go over this real quick. So, who feels comfortable explaining like the basis for why we as a whole are calling Marlene sus? What are the things that make us think that she might not be, a full-blooded human? And then let's discuss what the actual distinction between the Cetra and the humans are, according to the lore. Do you have anything, Lully, about this one?
I'm gonna let somebody else take the she's definitely sus and etc. And then I actually have something where I'm like, I don't know if I totally agree, so I'm gonna let somebody do the definitely is side first.
All right. You got this? You got this, Sleepezi?
So I will state my opinion about it first before I go into it, is that I'm completely unsure of this.
Right.
But I getting into this when I did over a year and a half ago, you're gonna hear about it. I know Pez has talked about it before too, so I'm familiar about it through him mostly. I haven't necessarily looked into this myself, but just going over Cetra really quick might be the best place to start. Is that a lot of people aren't really too familiar with how Cetra operate, whether they're like a race of people or if this is a sort of learned trait over time, or like all these like different ideas of like settlements of Cetra and like how like their general appearance on the planet and how they operate and where they came from is largely been debated for a pretty fair amount of time. And there's a couple of reasons for this. And one of them is like Bugenhagen as example, right? Is that we don't know exactly what Bugenhagen is, like whether he's a human or Cetra or whatever like that, classified as one or the other. But a lot of it seems as though he's just a regular guy who's just in tune with the planet. And his presence to me sort of signifies that, and maybe we see this more in Cetra, as Cetra can hear the planet. That's the tall tale trait of a Cetra. The Bugenhagen character also can hear the planet. So if that is the case, it doesn't necessarily have to be an inherited ability from birth. It's something that you can learn as well.
Right. In Dirge of Cerberus, 2 characters learn or can hear the planet.
Right. And yes, Vincent Valentine. Well, that's
Vincent's special, but
he's special.
Yeah.
But Reeve,
Yeah, Reeve also. It's when we hear the planet as well in the OG too. Like we can hear the cries of the planet, and we definitely hear the cries of the planet in Remake. But that's mainly through some function that we don't understand yet. So I guess just for chats, this is like the very like generalized statement is that Cetra are very confusing. We don't know a lot about them, and we're not exactly sure how they have come across the ability to do this. But it seems as though this can be applied to anybody. So even in the Marlene argument, is even if she is a Cetra, and there are multiple reasons why people think that, it could just be the fact that she is a human who knows how to do that, or she's just in tune with the planet naturally. But the thing is that the game, and I would think that it comes up more in Advent Children than anything, is that Marlene has an association with a lot of things that Cetra are already associated with. There's a lot of her with like flowers. There's a lot of her in like her theme song,
water,
her dress, too. All of these. Yeah, exactly. There's just a ton of parallels between what we would have associated Aerith with that also gets applied to Marlene. So there's no argument against those parallels as far as I'm concerned. I think that AC makes a pretty generalized point in her direction to sort of make it seem like she's sort of filling in for her shoes, or however you'd say that. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that's generally what I understand about it. And I'm sure that there are people who are a little bit more, and obviously like what Tsunamods just said is the implication of the tag is that maybe she isn't like even Dine's blood child. You know, she might have been adopted just in the same way that Barrett took her in after Dine left, because the birthday is unknown. So that's where this conversation starts to get a little bit more muddy, and I guess where we can start talking about it more openly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said.
I'll be right back.
Like, I have...
Keep it going, guys. You can do this.
I have a whole bunch of other things that I can like go off of as well. Like my whole idea around her not having a birthday, whatever else. I think in Before Crisis it was stated that Barrett went back to the village and he was digging through the rubble with one arm and found Marlene in a collapsed, burning building and decided to escape with her intact, right? Well, I know it's a video game, and video games don't have to be based on real life. But if you ask me, a mother, I mean, like, this is a coal village, and it's kind of in the old days, right? So mother usually tends to stay at home with child while dad's at work in the coal mine. Dine was out with Barrett, mother would be at home. But mother wasn't at home because we never found her body, we only found Marlene's body. Even after the town got cleaned up afterwards, no body. Nothing. It was either hidden, or it was destroyed, or it wasn't there, right? And a mother just wouldn't leave a child at home. Like, there was no babysitter that we're aware of. So I think that the mother, which I forget the name of right now...
I actually don't remember.
Eleanor.
Was who, sorry?
I believe it was Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Eleanor, yeah. I have a feeling that Eleanor was an ancient, and whenever Shinra decided to attack the village... she may have thought that they were attacking the village because she is an ancient, and she fled. Like, she just left Marlene and just ditched the town. Because we don't know she's dead. We've never got confirmation. We don't know anything about her. She just left. And she left Marlene in this building. That's why Barrett found her. And as well as, like, all of that stuff, Marlene being an ancient, for me, she was less than a year old from what I'm aware of. Based on timelines that somebody from the CCO helped me with. She gave me a few of these dates that I don't really understand too well. But she was less than a year old when they burnt that building down.
Mm-hmm.
A baby doesn't survive a building collapsing on itself while it's on fire. It just doesn't. That's not normal. And then there was another thing that we found was that, I may be wrong here, but Marlene stands for water in some language. It represents water, and then Aerith represented sun, or like it was the other way around, or
earth.
I don't know.
Aerith represented
earth and water.
the earth,
It was one of those, yeah. And Marlene was the water. And the one thing that can combat fire is water, right? She's in a burning building. She's representing of water, and she couldn't set on fire. I don't know. She's just tolerant to fire or something.
I'm going to jump in right there because for those, again, this is a Cetra thing, and I generalized this when I was speaking about it before, but one of the parallels between the Cetra that is directly associated with both of those topics, so earth and water as signifiers for, or just like the names of these two characters, both the planet, which is obvious to everybody, but there's more to this than just the surface level terminology, but earth and water are directly linked to representations of the Cetra, specifically water in Advent Children and throughout the compilation. You actually see the use of water. For people who are maybe not more familiar with like the compilation as an example, and I'll take from Remake, is that you see the use of water in the scene with Marlene as a direct parallel. When she's watering the plants, she's watering the flowers, and then the drip of water falls from the tip of the leaf, and Marlene like senses something, and she asks for daddy, right? And then flowers like fly up, and then Barrett like reaches out as if there's some sort of connection being made there. This connection has already happened before. In terms of like the parallels there, is that in Advent Children, that's how Aerith, that's how Marlene senses the presence of Aerith in Advent Children during the Sephiroth fight. There's a drop of water, and Marlene is alerted to Aerith's presence.
Right.
So,
the flower girl.
Yeah, exactly. So there's, I just want to. This is a language thing of Final Fantasy VII, so to speak, is that this seems to be the way that Cetra are depicted, or just a spiritual connection being made is depicted in all of the compilation. And there's many more examples of that. But as far as backing up just the use of that in her name, I would say it immediately ties her to spirituality in some sense.
And additionally, with water and Marlene, there's in chat somebody brought up that children might just be naturally more sensitive, and there is a very clear distinction between the way that, in particularly Remake, Betty associates with Aerith and Marlene associates with Aerith, and very specifically, when the tears from Marlene's eyes contact Aerith is when she has that flash, and then something unspoken is communicated to her that gives her enough understanding to suddenly fully trust Aerith. So it doesn't appear as if Aerith has willfully done anything. It's as if they're both responding to the connection. Like both of them, if you go frame by frame, it does not look like one caused it. It felt like they were both unaware it would happen. And so that kind of adds a little bit of fuel to that fire.
I do want to also say that the official Crane, and this is where we sort of balance things out, is that official Crane says, examining Advent Children Complete, which is the entire version of Advent Children that was released at the end of the compilation, though we can make the argument that children are more connected to the planet. And that's also true for On the Way to a Smile as well, where we see most depictions of geostigma highlighting children as being affected.
I think that's why Kadaj sort of went for children too.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
kind of my thought.
Left out Marlene.
Yeah. And a lot, I feel like in general, I don't know if you can say this specifically about Japan, but I know that children and the elderly are often considered like closest to like the afterlife or before life, because kids just came from it and older people are about to go back. So they tend to have more of a natural spiritual connection to whatever is beyond. And I've always, based on the compilation, I've always gotten that sense that whatever Marlene is sensing, it's simply because she's a child, so she's just more sensitive. She might not be like a Cetra, but I've always just gotten the implication, the idea or whatever, that she's just able to kind of pick up on these things, especially in Advent Children Complete, because it's so much about children and how they react to things and how like they can always sense Aerith's presence. Even in, I think, the original game, if you go back to Sector 5 and Disc 3, there's children in Aerith's church and they knew she was there. They saw her because you could talk to them and they're like, where'd she go? So
those children are actually there the entire game. As soon as you get out of the church with Aerith, you can walk back around and go in, and they're there immediately.
I found that by accident, by the way. I was like, what is happening? I still have her in my party. I was like, I'm tripping out. And this was while I was doing like research and stuff like that. So I was like, this has to be, I'm not running away with this. I need somebody to tell me that this is a glitch.
And I agree with what's being said here in general. Like, I think it's a very easy and safe argument to make. And it's probably the one I would have made 3 or 4 days ago. But the more I've thought about it, thanks to Tsunamods, it seems actually clear that they're making a very clear narrative choice to distinguish Marlene from other children. She is the only child that does not suffer from geostigma.
Yeah.
In all of Advent Children.
Doesn't get to drink the water.
And
I think
and she's given a direct parallel to Betty in the very same scene that's pictured, actually, but only Marlene has the connection. So I do feel like they're trying to draw on something. So she might. I'm not saying that means she's a Cetra, but she's definitely being shown as more sensitive than other children. And it's not like lack of despair, because that's how geostigma works canonically. Right. I think it's more that they're trying to distinguish her from somewhere, and then also they do make a very clear change in the dialogue. It's actually you first hear it in chapter 13, and it's when after the Athalna scene, Aerith is referred to as probably the last Cetra, not the last Cetra, probably the last Cetra, which I felt was like a very bizarre distinction for Elmira to make. So it's possible that that's a English only localization thing. Certainly we've seen stuff like that before. But also we have to consider the possibility, just the sheer logistics of there being just one of a species, as recent, that means that generationally there was at least at least 4 or 5 functional pairs up to 2 generations ago. The actual function of extinction is very weird. But then again, we get to this weird point where we look at what Sephiroth describes as an ancient is just people that made a different choice. In the OG dialogue, the distinction between humanity and the Cetra was choice. And so, all those waters do get muddy, but I do feel like they're trying to make a narrative choice with Marlene based on that information.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, because a lot of the time when I'm working on FF7, I use a newly retranslated script. So I could be wrong about the original text here, but doesn't Rufus tell Cloud in the Shinra building that Sephiroth is a Cetra too?
I think under false pretense of how everybody sort of, I don't think he does, but I haven't looked at OG in a really long time, but off the top of my head, I don't think so.
Right. Okay.
But that's just, again, I'm
it's not. Yeah, I'm thinking.
Go on it. Fly my pretties into Google. See if something might shake loose there. But what were you going to say about that, Bunny? Just because I know you were going to say something that contradicted, I also have something to say about it. But I wanted to hear your thoughts before I jumped in.
Like I said, so my take on it is that I think in the original compilation, at the very least, in the original compilation, I don't think it was that deep. I think it was more like, you know, a little girl sees this woman that she's just like, oh, she's very pretty, she's very nice, she protected me, I want to be like her. And that she's also a kid, so she's just naturally more sensitive. That's the feeling I got. I don't know that I necessarily want her to be the last Cetra, but I would not put it past Square to have seen this theory and thought, let's run with it. Like, why wouldn't, like, they can. I mean, Marlene's mom doesn't have any lore, as chat is saying. Like, they could feasibly do that, especially to purposely have Elmira say probably the last one. And it's true that, I mean, we only know for sure about Ifalna and Aerith. And like, we don't know anything about Ifalna's background. There's like headcanons that Gast and Ifalna met in Cosmo Canyon. I have yet to find a source on that one. I was looking, but I didn't see it.
There's nothing.
Unfortunately, there's absolutely. I just as a pet peeve, like that particular part of history is always, and I've been faulted for it too, because I've made some pretty outlandish ideas based off of like the timing of like when Ifalna. I'm snapping back into that pronunciation just because I'm having flashbacks. But to that particular, some particular theory surrounding that, and for the most part, and I've looked, but I haven't been able to find anything substantial enough to put anybody in that particular time and place. I was actually about to mention the same thing, by the way, which is that a part of me, the thing I was going to bring up is that in AC we see the same children scene happen again with Aerith and the kids before the movie ends, which is that she's like just talking to the kids. And I think the entire point of Advent Children is to signify that the world is dying not only on a physical level, like Sephiroth is about to take over the planet's Lifestream, but it's also about where the planet and the people on it are at emotionally and psychologically. Is that the reason that geostigma exists is for the idea of the lack of hope in the future. And if that affects children, the point of that is to signify that there is no future for them, or they don't think that they have a future, which is also a reflection of where Cloud is at too, where he's like, I can't move on. I don't know where my place is either. So like, and he's also compared to as a child just because he kind of still is in that movie. But that being said,
he actually de-ages a little bit.
Yeah, they put that CGI goop on him to make him look younger.
He's missing like 5 years of his life or something, isn't he?
Right. Yeah, he's still a child, so it's just
a teenage boy in his mind.
That's right. So, and then, but to your point that you made is that I definitely don't put it past Square, and I think actually to bring up Peasant for a second, because he made this comparison very clearly, and a lot of people go back to this conversation and have cited this particular quote from, I think, Katase. I think this is actually during one of the videos that I was making, part 3, where I was talking about Cetra and summons and all this other stuff. But one of the interview questions, he was asked about an old theory about the Knights of the Round.
The Knights of the Round, yeah.
A lot of people theory crafted that they are the people who sealed Jenova away, because there is a band of Cetra that got together to seal Jenova or fight Jenova. And people thought that the Knights of the Round represented all of those characters, all those Cetra that did that. And Katase was like, that's absolutely wrong. And he laughed it off. But he said like, not to, like, I don't think he was being that aggressive about it. I actually think, though, he made a really good point, which is he's like, don't say those things, because then we'll have to do those things. And now, sure enough, the point that Pez made, and I think it's a completely valid statement because it's happening, is they've now created parallels between the Cetra, or between, well, you could say that.
The summons, yeah.
The summons to the people who sealed Jenova away, or they were used to do that. So Shiva has that in her description now in Remake. So they've obviously been paying attention to everything that's been said, and we know that Katase reads the theories. And to your point,
there was original cut dialogue in the Temple of the Ancients where he said that, though, right?
Yeah, that's my favorite bit of cut dialogue I think in the game And there's a ton of people, including myself, that are like convinced. I am personally convinced that Cetra are summons, which is where the slip of the tongue came in. Is that the backstory for those who haven't seen this in chat or whatever? There's a bit of dialogue in the Temple of the Ancients where Sephiroth, I think, after you kill the dragon boss and you get the Bahamut materia, explains to the party that what Cetra, or what summons essentially are either creatures or humans or Cetra that were bathed in Mako and then sealed into materia. So what that essentially is the same process of like creating the OG soldier.
Yeah.
So, but that unfortunately does not actually exist in the game and was cut. But another theory is that, again, like Cetras and summons, or Cetra created the summons in the same way that Shinra created soldiers. So it's essentially just the same thing happening again in time. To a degree, or at least in a less natural way through Shinra. So I know I tangented there.
Well, no, and so let me pull up that quote just because the Kitase quote, because it is kind of relevant to this, because this is one of those fan theories. You know, the Marlene thing is a fan theory, and on the theory, and this was the specific question asked of Kitase, on the theory that Final Fantasy VII's Knights of the Round are really the Cetra that defeated Genova 1,000 years before the events of the game. And to which Kitase's response was, "Everyone's thinking too deeply, reading between the lines too much," laughed Kitase. "That makes it difficult, because if you think about it that way, we might have to make it that way. That's definitely not true." And now it is true. It is in the both the slide, which are now gone in Intergrade, RIP slides, and the assessment for Shiva indicate that she was in fact a summon that sealed a great calamity, a great wound to the planet. And so, I mean, like the language is meant really clearly to say she did this thing that fans theorized was going to happen. You know, like, you guys made this happen.
That's what it said in the Japanese dialogue. It just said that somebody on the internet once said that this is what this character did. So, putting it in the game now, but I think
I honestly see that as being something that it feels like they're doing with Marlene. Like, I feel like they're at least leaning into it.
Yeah.
That's
it might never become like integral to the main plot, but they might lean into it just to make fans really excited. Kind of like, ooh, is she? Isn't she?
You
know.
How do we feel about that from like a story standpoint? Because I think the when you made that point about it being like, oh, like they could just do that, and like, why wouldn't they, right? And I completely agree with that. But the fact that for me, it comes down to, it's like, why wouldn't they? Yeah, that's a really good point to make. But there's a part of me where it's like, should they? Should they?
Right.
Though?
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a very tough
like
balance.
It also kind of takes away from, if they do decide to still do the thing with Aerith as it happened in the original, does that not then kind of, I mean, it's still tragic, but then it's kind of like, oh, she wasn't the last. We still have this little one. But maybe that's also them being like, hope isn't ever lost. It depends on how they execute it, I guess.
I'm very against it, to be totally honest. Like, I think they might be doing it, and I'm very against it. I think it was very important. Really it was very important. It's very important that she was the last of her species. It was part of the tragedy of it.
Yeah.
I hate to say
and it
I
was
think it'll
nothing
matter.
to Sephiroth too. Like, that's what's even worse. In the same way that it was nothing to Shinra to kill all those innocent people, it's kind of Sephiroth doing the same thing. Like, it was nothing to him to just kill the last of a species, you know, the last of a race, the last of an ethnicity, whatever you want to, whatever term you want to use.
Well, he believes that he's won as well, at the very least,
I
right?
think at that point he doesn't anymore.
No, he had gained the knowledge of the Cetra. He had gained an understanding of what he was, but he also gained enough understanding to recognize that the Cetra were Genova's mortal enemy.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, it could have been personal for him. Never mind.
No, I think that's pretty much the takeaway. Is as soon as he falls into the live stream, he's like, I'm just the worst. I'm the baddest motherfucker in the galaxy. Like, my mom took over planets. Now I'm gonna run this up. Dude, now that I look at him like that, like just even as a joke, that character is completely ruined. But I think one of the things that I not to spoil the next video that I'm doing, but a lot of it is looking at how the micro events of like character interactions sort of reflect into the larger sort of psychological and spiritual aspect of the story, and how what's happening on the smallest of scales is also happening on the largest playing field of Final Fantasy VII's world. So like what we know of like Sephiroth and like Aerith is that they essentially represent the forces of good and evil, right? You have the absolute evil, which is Jenova, like embodied by Sephiroth in a worse way than she was before in some cases. And then you have the last of what is good being represented in Aerith. That's what her role is she is extremely charming and very like in the now, and that in Remake is like 100%. Like she's always just trying to have a good time sort of thing. Just full of life, right? That's what that character is. So I think in that sense, that's sort of what her death, like we've already been talking about. It's already what it kind of means in Final Fantasy VII when she dies, is that that's sort of that's what's on the line. It's not just Sephiroth kills, and it matters, right? Is that this is a character that we care about, but it's also what this represents as a spiritual like change, right? Is that the last of good is being taken by evil. And now it's like, what on earth do we do now sort of moment. And so it's like the Cloud interaction, his relationship with both Sephiroth and Aerith being highlighted there, and this spiritual battle at the same time. And I think that's one of the things that sort of needs to be maintained. So I don't, as much as I like the idea of like I think in hints, right, Marlene could be like hinted at as like a last Cetra. Like I can see them doing that. But at the same time, that's already embodied by just what children are, right? Is that the point of Advent Children is that children get to, they haven't lost hope. They are cured of their hopelessness at the end. So there is hope for the future in not just Cetra, right? It's more about what this represents for all of humanity, which is sort of, not very clear at the end of Final Fantasy VII, is that like humanity as a whole is in question by the end of the original. And I think Advent Children is sort of aware of that. It's like, okay, well, they lived, but like they're like, where is that going? Like for them, not into a good place, as we find out. So
well, trauma has lasting effects.
Yes.
Is that not the whole reason why the whole like Omega weapon spiel happened in Dirge? Because Omega's thing is that this planet's screwed. I may as well move on.
Yeah. Go there.
If he had a voice, that's exactly what he would say. This planet is screwed.
Yeah.
Wins.
And it's sort of the same as like in the remake when they get the flashes of the future from Sephiroth on the highway, and Red gets his, and they were all questioning it, like, what is this? And he says that is, he effectively said that was the bad future. So if we fail here today, we're going to continue on the timeline of the OG, and we're going to get to the bad future, which is what actually happened in the original. And the reason that's the bad future is because humans go extinct, or like
something happens.
Omega does something
awful happens.
Yeah,
you don't want that for some reason. As far as they're putting it to us, yeah, that whole phrasing of it is very odd.
I like that. As minor of a detail as it is, whenever I listened to the on the way to the Smile audiobooks. During that scene where Nanaki and his children are running up and they're going to Midgar and they see it all like greened over and whatnot, like it was interesting for me to find that in one of the books, I believe that he's going there specifically to meet Vincent because they made a deal because they would outlive everybody else.
Right.
They would meet in Midgar once a year. And I'm pretty sure that's why he's going to Midgar there.
Oh, that's pretty dope.
Yeah.
I did not guess that. I'll be honest, I have a hard time reading any of the Final Fantasy books.
Yeah, I don't read anything. Like, the Lifestream.net did audiobooks for them, and they're incredible, honestly.
That's what happens when you have translation. It gets really stilted and awkward. It's hard to read through.
Yeah, for sure.
The English localization of On the Way to a Smile, like the official one, is pretty. Both of them are pretty good. And then the Livestream.net ones are okay. But what's great about the Livestream.net ones is they've got audiobooks. And it kind of, you can like put up with a lot if somebody's reading it to you. Like, it's a lot
I fell
easier.
asleep listening to them. Like, they're so easy to listen to.
Yeah, and they got great talent doing the actual readings.
Yeah. I think
So
Brain was in one of those too.
You know, the narrative of the OG does use a lot of negative space when doing its storytelling and its world building, and but it seems really clear, at least from my perspective, especially with some of the detail oriented looks we've seen at the compilation, like details like Diabolic Ifrit and stuff like that, or the weird Easter egg details on the license plate in Seventh Heaven. Like, those kind of details do show that, like, there's been what I think is a pretty solid continuity behind the scenes where everybody involved in development understands the world concepts at a real high and functional level, even if they don't necessarily convey that to us. Enough that, like, in random developer interviews, like, they can just ask, hey, what's Minerva? And then some random developer can say, oh, that's the will of the planet. And we, as like the audience, are like, what the fuck did you just say? And but it's true. Like, then you start like looking at the imagery and the iconography, and you see all the themes line up pretty heavily. So those details in that world building does seem to be there. But do you think it would really? Are you hoping for moving forward that they use more concrete language and more clearly define the mechanics of some of these world building concepts? Things like the live stream, things like memory, things like the Cetra. Like, who are they? Is it a choice? What happens to a Cetra to make them Ramu? Things like that. Like, do you want more context like that? And do you want it to be well spelled out? Or would you rather that it takes the same story approach that it has, which is to kind of use these details and these small little lore nuggets and like kind of require this extreme level of scrutiny to really gather the functions of the planet and the functions of the world system here? What do you guys think are like the pros and cons of those two styles?
I think they kind of have to. Just because, they've made Final Fantasy VII once already. And 20 years later, we're still sat here talking about it. Now, granted, that's great for promotion. That makes a great video game. We're still 20 years later. Mm-hmm. Like, it's, it's not getting forgotten. But at the same time, it's 20 years later. It's a different timeline. Right now, they're having to target two different audiences now. As opposed to then, they targeted people that played PlayStation games, For the most part, it was children or mid-adults. Now they have two target audiences they have to apply to, which is us, which are now in our 30s that played the original as children, and the new children that are going to play it when they get it for Christmas, I think they're going to do it in a special sort of two-way, where they're going to spell everything out easy enough that the children will get their story, they'll understand it, and they'll walk away happy. but there's going to be all the hints in there for the older generation that has to work it out. And it kind of reminds me of, like, way off topic here, but, you know, there's like old kids cartoons where they design them in such a way with dirty jokes in, knowing the parents are sat there bored watching these cartoons with them, and they're like, that's funny. The kid has no idea, you know. I think they're going to do it in a similar way to that.
Huh.
I think it depends entirely on how they do it, because I don't mind if, like, you have side quests or side content where you can go digging for lore. Like, me personally, I hope when we get the Shinra Mansion, I hope we actually have more access to some of those books and maybe can read more about what people were studying or what was archived there, just as like a personal, like, digging into some more lore, and maybe some of it's like redacted or whatever, so you have to put the pieces together, because it's always fun to have a puzzle. But I think for main story, you kind of have to have things a little vague, because that's the point. Like, some of this knowledge is kind of sort of lost to the general public, and you're playing as characters who are kind of unearthing it as they go, and they never get all the answers by the end based on, like, how you play. So I kind of feel like for main story plot, it kind of needs to, they need to explain it in a way that you can at least understand what you're doing and why.
Yeah.
But I also think to maintain a little bit of that vagueness, just so that you can feel like, okay, I relate to the characters because they're learning, I'm learning with them. You know,
that's an excellent point. And the books thing, oh my god, like I can't tell you.
Dreaming of that.
Well, and there's a giant library in Remake with no books. It was infuriating. Right? It was infuriating.
We looked over that library a couple times. Just like, it's like, are we going to look at that again just to see if something, and then it's like, it just always ends in like, why did we do this? Disappointment. I hate to say this, Clark, but I feel like this question is a little loaded. I feel like this is a loaded question. I feel like this is, Clark knows what this next video is. So when he brought that up, in my mind, I was just like, oh, there's like 10 red flags going up for this. I think you both are absolutely right, where there is this necessary want, or this need to sort of have just enough there to allow people to play a game and not have it, be like they're missing something in the game that they're playing. I think that's a huge goal for this game, is that there is a sort of want to cater to new people coming into it. But at the same time, it's weird to me because looking at the compilation, a lot of the times what I end up coming across is that a lot of what feels like are the places in Remake story where everybody's like, what the fuck just happened? Like, what is the ending? Like that's the obvious sore thumb, right? Is that so many people were just so put off by this one thing. And I can only say, as like, it's varying in terms of not only OG players, but also new players, where they're just like, what is going on here? Like, I have no idea. And some like it and some don't. But a lot of that can get context from looking at the extra material. And I agree with what you're saying, Bunny, about it, because I agree that a story shouldn't have to be this sort of this, you have to read all the side novels and like in order to understand what's happening. You should be able to just get into something, understand it, and feel like you're playing something like competently made as just what it's presenting you by itself. Hints and stuff are separate from that for me. But like, in order to understand the part of the story that make sense of it all, I shouldn't have to go watch like Advent Children 3 times, go read On the Way to a Smile, and then like play a Japanese mobile game that doesn't even exist anymore, essentially. So I do think, though, that there are hints of Remake sort of failing at doing this, to me, like the ending being one of them for many people, because just looking at it from like a broader interest perspective, I can see how that could put people off. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think what you were saying is that the subtlety of it, Like, they just have to understand it enough, right? They just have to understand enough of what is driving them forward to stay engaged with the content that they're playing. And I think knowing Nomura too is that not everything just comes out flat out and is like, this is 100% explained. Like, a lot of his things are very meta, very like sort of visual, I guess, self-expression and visual. Yeah. A lot of that language is really interesting to look at, and in that it's just going to be inherently vague. But I think what Remake is doing particularly is it's using the language that the compilation made to like reinforce what OG already did. So like, while that language, like for instance, and I mentioned this on the last podcast, is the blue sky is the easiest thing to point to. So there's constant mentions of like sky's the limit, where's a roof when you need one. I miss it, the steel sky, like all of these like little references. That's stuff found in the compilation. That's Crisis Core to a T. Is the blue sky has a whole like mention in an Ultimania about like what that means, and it's about like the limitless potential of like Zack, but in Remake it takes on the definition for all of the characters. So rather than
like boundless freedom, right?
Right, boundless, terrifying freedom. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Tsunamods. So the point that I'm making here is that you won't have to have played Crisis Core to get that, because Remake's just using the same language to build that same topic again for the newer audience. I think that's where Remake is going to win. I don't think it's going to win the battle of like, see what we did there with this thing right here. Like, that's going to be fun for OG fans. But if, like you said, if like entire plot points hinge on like you having played Dirge of Cerberus, that's ultimately where this game is going to fail. In terms of a storytelling narrative perspective, because it's never fun for anybody to have. Like, I can tell you with 100% certainty that playing through, watching, and all of the research that I've done turns out it's not that fun to watch Crisis Core all the cutscenes like 4 times. It's not. It's not as engaging as you might think. So you don't want to send your audience on that kind of goose chase if you can help it.
Absolutely, and so. And I am sorry for bringing that point up, and I will admit that a little bit of it was directed at your at things I know,
the memory,
things that I know that are going on in the background. Something interesting, and I don't want to get too hung up on reception, because that's obviously like a big topic all the time. But I will say it was very interesting. The Final Fantasy Union poll that was very exhaustive. Like as easy it is to kind of just be like, oh, well, what's a poll going to tell you? That poll was done with some real gusto. And one of the things that I was probably the most surprised about was that in general, Remake was rated higher by people that had never played the original by a fair margin. And so it's one of those things that like, a lot of the story choices they made, did have to kind of be mindful of the original, but still present information in a way that was accessible to new people. And I think one thing that Remake does really well in terms of lore, world building, is that you can look at most people, whether or not they are aware of this or not, I think can look at like a design, something that's been designed, and their brain will just sort of connect to whether or not that thing has a significant history or not. And a lot of just the little objects in like the actual layout of Midgar in Remake, if you look closely, have a history and have all this context. And whether or not like anybody's actually actively aware of that, or they're actively tuned in to like the significance of that license plate, or the bizarre Nikon camera, or the camera that is on the poster, or even stamp bags or flowers, like even though you might not know what the actual meaning is, most people can kind of look at that and they make a value judgment that there's a quality to it, that it doesn't have some superficial use. And there's a lot of objects that do clearly have superficial use and are meaningless, palette swaps. And, people can pick up on that too. But where it counts, Remake tells a lot of its, I think, story that's for maybe us, OG fans that have really immersed ourselves in the lore, tells a lot of that lore story through just those associations, just through creating this history through a visual connection. And I think they have to maintain that level of storytelling throughout, and that gets complex. And why that gets more difficult in future parts, in my mind anyways, is that now you do kind of need to cash the check you wrote with the mystery built up in part one. And if you're essentially only answering questions through through
vagaries,
context, and like phantom ifrit limbs on the back of a diabolic creation, like, you're gonna leave a lot of people wanting. Because you've really set a big mystery. So it's almost like they really have to learn how to create a concrete world system that is expressed clearly enough to, cash that big whisper check. But
they kind of already shot themselves in the foot a little bit, didn't they? Because they kind of just came out and said, it's like, hey, this Zack thing, isn't that super important? You know what I mean? It's almost like, as much as what you're saying is, you're absolutely right. The things that they have introduced that are so crazy and like new, like those are meant for the audience, or at least, and it would be really dumb if they didn't have this in mind, is that like the audience is definitely going to have questions about that, and they've already seen the response to that. But the fact that now they have to, they've set themselves up to try and explain things in such a weird way, right?
Right, in a way that's different than the way they've previously told stories. I'm not saying they can't do it, but they're going to have to change tactics. Yeah.
Right. I think it's a weird gear change. And that's one of the reasons I don't talk about Zack at all, is because it's such a clear line in the sand of like, you need to have this explained, or at least to some degree, but like that's almost, it's raising the bar for them so high in terms of like how much excitement and anticipation that just inherently brings to the table, that it almost feels like any answer. Like they were going to have a tough time approaching like older events and recreating them, but now they've set an impossibly high bar of like, what new is, what you're doing that's new needs just as good of an explanation, if not better than what the original gave us already. And that goes back to what Bunny was saying, is that like, how much of this is, like needs to be explained, or maybe a little bit of vagary. Maybe I don't know. That's just one of the weirder things to me about the subject. I know that people are really excited about it. And that's good. I'm glad that they are. It's just it's like a corner that they keep inching towards. I'm like, you don't have to do that to yourself. Like,
it's easy to do wrong. That's the problem.
Yeah.
See, I think they've gone pretty smart with it, just because. And I don't know if there's really evidence to support this, but at least in my opinion, the reason they've been so smart with this is because they knew they were gonna have an uphill battle the entire way with people that saw Remake and I want a 1-to-1 remake. If you change anything, I'll hate you forever. I'll never buy another game. Blah blah blah. Right. And obviously the motto is always you can't please everybody, but most companies go by just piss off as few as you can, right? But with them introducing the whole whisper thing, and the whispers being plot armor, they've wrote it in such a way where the whispers are kind of us. The whispers are the fans that don't want the game to change whatsoever. And in playing part 1, we as the player have been forced to kill the whispers that represent the player. So if at any point we do get to a part where it's changed drastically and people start complaining about it, Square is going to be able to pull the card and be like, well, you killed the Whispers. Like, it's your fault, not mine, you know?
That can be taken really insulting, too, because it is kind of a slap in the face. Like, yeah, we get it. This is your favorite. I don't give a shit how you feel about your favorite game. I want to do what I want to do. Because for me personally, like, so when they remade the Maleficent film, so spoilers for the live action Angelina Jolie Maleficent film. When they remade it and they basically told fans everything you know about your favorite story is a lie, this is the real story, or this is Maleficent's side. No matter like how good it was, it kind of felt shitty because it was my favorite Disney film and they were basically telling me everything that you liked about this is wrong. So like forget about it. So I think you got to be careful about how you do it.
Yeah, and
you can't just basically say you're wrong.
Yeah, and you know, I don't think they were. Yeah, I mean, certainly a meta commentary can be made, like a comparison can be made between us and the Whispers, like the OG fans and the Whispers. But the Whispers weren't necessarily demonized. Like they were actually set out to be kind of victims. They were victims of Sephiroth's manipulation. And and they did save your life several times. They saved Barrett's life. So they're not the bad guys, right? You know, so I think even though the meta commentary is there, I'm not necessarily sure, you could pin that on them.
It could be accidental. Like we could be sitting here saying, "Look, they're taking a jab at us," when really they're like, "Oh, I didn't realize they were going to take it personally."
Yeah,
anything they could do, anything they think up could have double meaning. And this is them doing that same thing. We'll give you 50% of the cake, and you have to try and find the rest, you know?
Yeah.
It's the same. We're going to keep you talking about this game for 20 years, too.
I not to jump in here too quickly, but it's also this weird sort of duality that I have with this, that it's like they've already proven that they handle a lot of, like, the newer elements, like, for me at least, I'm speaking personally, like, pretty well, and they've turned a lot of like heads with just like the way that they just recently handled Deep Ground, where it's just like they're obviously not opposed to taking on like the fan base. It's almost like they're throwing the gloves down. It's like, you hate this, like we're gonna make it great. And that's fantastic. I love that attitude, but it's working. It's working so far. It's just that there's like hesitation even still. Like I felt like that was enough to push people to be like, okay, well, wherever they go, this is going to be great. But even now, like now that Intermission is sort of settled, I'm still like looking at these other things, like that ending for Intermission. I'm just like, I have no idea like how you're going to do that right. But I'm also semi-optimistic only because their track record is more pros than cons for me now.
And so something interesting too is like I almost died on the Sonon Hill because I too was not a big fan of it. I've never got as much blowback about like not understanding a scene, like the way that Night Sky Prince talks about like how your videos are weaponized against him constantly. Like I got the same kind of blowback about like, you just didn't get the Sonon thing. Like it's a cultural thing. And I will grant that that's a possibility. So I'm just going to step back from that one. But one of the things that I found interesting, particularly about Intermission, and then we'll stop talking about like whether the game is good or not, and then get back to lore, is that like Intermission addressed specific complaints about the game that could not be argued in any way, shape, or form, like aerial combat, textures, even some of like the dialogue pacing criticisms. I noticed they figured out how to like do away with a lot of the grunts in Intermission. Like a lot of complaints were clearly addressed in Intermission, enough to let me know that Square is fully aware of what people feel about Final Fantasy VII Remake, and they addressed the things that they looked at and were like, yeah, that's valid. We're gonna we can adjust that. That's fair. We can adjust that. But on several things, several key points, they were like, we don't necessarily think those criticisms are worth changing our direction on. And it's either to me that they lack the self-awareness, or they have the self-awareness and don't care, or they are fully aware that what they're planning to do subverts the general expectation of people that, you know, have sort of catastrophized the way things are going. Like, people see Zack in any way, shape, or form alive, immediately Aerith's definitely going to live for sure. Final Fantasy VII's ruined. No way they can save it. Zack's life cycle is absolutely critical to Cloud. Cloud is ruined. You know, like, either they're aware of those complaints and don't care about them, or they're aware of them and they think that the direction they have lined up will subvert that expectation. And the reason I'm leaning to that is because they were so generally aware of things like aerial combat, texture filtering, you know, the grunts, like just the little things that they needed to adjust to make this feel really good. And even compilation stuff, like how can, like you said, like, I mean, I've never heard people being pro Vice and pro Nero. Now there's the, you know, the gnarliest fan art you can imagine is all over my Twitter feed. Like, they just love that. They love those guys. Like, it just turned on like the highest level thirst for deep ground. And I never thought I'd see the day in my life that we would see like a pro deep ground Twitter, you know? And so, like, I do feel like, based solely on that, that's the probability. But, you know, quite frankly, we'll know so quick into part 2 whether that's what they're going to do or not, you know?
To think that story based, at least, they're actually 10 steps ahead of us, but they just don't want us to think that.
They
thought of the idea for game 1, and then they were like,
chess.
all right, when they play this, what are they going to think? And then they wrote down all their ideas and went, all right, so we'll do this, this, and this to combat that, you know, and just...
Right.
I want to say, in regards to the technical issues we had on the PS4 release, I mean, I don't have any sources to back this up. This is a personal feeling that I've always had, that they actually always intended for this game to be a PS5 exclusive, but the PS5 did not come out as soon as they wanted, so they last minute changed it to PS4, and that's also why the Yuffie DLC is only for PS5. I think that's why they had so many technical issues, because they were making it for something that was going to be able to run it, and the PS4 just wasn't up to snuff, kind of thing.
I agree with that.
I fully agree.
Yeah, I don't have any disagreement with that. And I will just say, in general, like, the way that it runs on the PS5, it's almost like Cryzen PC Gamer. Yeah, Phantom Valentine. I think that absolutely it was almost like, okay, you think that this isn't the next gen game and this could only be on PS4? Well, Intermission's like, it just looks better. It just looks better. And I don't think that, I know that this is, even when I didn't have a PS5, and I was very lucky to get one, and I'm not at all like, you know, not relating to that factor, but I seriously was just like, there's no way that anything that they were going to do was going to be for the PS4 version. I know that there's a lot of companies that are still like releasing like a lot of these next gen games on PS4, like God of War is coming. The next one is coming out on PS4 too. And there's a ton of other games like that, like Elden Ring. And I think it's mostly to do with the climate of things that's the case. It's more for their own asses that they're like, oh my God, like this game is not going to sell if we don't have those there. That is also a personal opinion of mine, like how I see it. It's not just greed. It's more out of like, well, we were already building this thing and we're already developing the next one for the PS5. So like, we're just going to do what we can on just this one thing, because and they try to make it as accommodating as possible with like the save file loading and all this other stuff. Like they obviously had something in mind for PS4 users. Otherwise they would have just left us hanging to dry with just the PS4 save files. On the subject of awareness, and I know you're trying to get off the topic, Clark, so I won't like linger on this too much. I actually think that like the assessment of the whispers is very conscious. I know that was a conversation a little bit ago. Is like I think that as much as like the audience might be perceived like the fan base as the fan base, I do think even if those end up not being what those are, I think one of the advantages that Final Fantasy VII has, Remake specifically, is that they've had like so much time to think about this game. And it's very clear that they have been, just with what they've done with Remake, whether you like it or not. Like they've obviously been thinking about how they're going to approach this. I almost feel like what they're going to do is like a Mr. Miyagi move, where it's like we're going to use what your perception is of the game against you as much as we humanly can, and that's only because it's like it messes with people. It just messes with the audience to a degree where you're just on uncertain ground. And I think the more that they build on that, from not only just the perspective as the developers going into it, but as much as they can integrate that into like the structure of Final Fantasy VII's world, I think that would be an amazing thing to see. Like the whispers are an example of that. It's like, okay, we're using maybe audiences' perspectives to like have an inclusion in the story as a function of the world. I think that there's way more to that than we're even seeing. I have particularly, again, not to spoil like the next video that I'm making, but a lot of this has to do with that particular viewpoint on it. And I think even if this all fails and like they do get it wrong, it will be a pretty spectacular thing to try and see them pull off, for sure.
I think ever since day one, when I learned that FF7 was going to be different, I decided to not care. Just because, like, playing through the remake myself, anytime something happened that wasn't in the original, I was there like, you know what? How many times or how many events or anything can you think of in your lifetime where you're gonna do something for the first time a second time? Like, it'll never happen, ever. Except for FF7. You're getting to play FF7 for the first time ever a second time right now. And that, to me, as an OG player from 20 years ago, like, that's incredible. And my opinion, I suppose, like, it's easier for me to feel like I don't really care if they change the remake or fuck it up. Because, you know, I'm remastering FF7, the original,
Yeah.
so, like, the future is kind of, you know, I'm doing that. So I'm not that bothered by it, but I don't know, I really like the idea. Like, for me, like, if my open letter to Square, I'd be like, do what the hell you want. I'm gonna enjoy it either way, and if I don't like it, I'll play the original. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Okay, so enough of that.
No more of that.
No more. Let's talk about Roche. I'm just kidding.
I do want to bring up something, if it's okay.
Of course.
Because we were talking about, you know, like lore, spirituality, all of that, and because I played Dirge of Cerberus, I've been playing it recently for the second time, third time, I don't remember.
Please check it out, by the way. It's very enjoyable to watch.
But, you know, Lucrezia goes on to this field. We kind of have, I believe it's new knowledge in Dirge, this idea that the universe, just like planets, has its own kind of life cycle. Like planets, the planet has a life stream, and then the planets within the universe have a life cycle, and they live and die. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering, now that we have Deep Ground introduced into Remake, I'm wondering, do you guys think that we're going to get the Omega and the potential, like, literal end of the world that we're going to have to stop? Like, not only from outside forces, but from with inside forces. We're fighting both sides, you know what I mean? Do you think we're going to have to do that?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to... what you just expressed is something that was, like, and still is, for me, like, a huge reason why I think I really like Remake's story. Is it almost feels as though that so like not necessarily, right, like the physical events of like Dirge of Cerberus are happening again necessarily, but the concept of like like as a really easy example of this is that in Dirge of Cerberus it's Omega and there's chaos and there's these weapons and they're like gonna like send the planet off into a different life stream and there's all sorts of stuff attached to that with the plot and we have to stop it. But like the subtlety to me in Remake, and this is sort of what I was talking about before, is that this is one of those things where like we're getting like compilation sort of perspectives inside of just the OG story, is that when we get to the edge of creation with Sephiroth, like his goal isn't just, it doesn't look like it's just the planet right now. It's like he's looking into the cosmos and like all of this. It's like, I want all of this. Like, I don't want just this planet. Like, I want all of this other stuff. And so like going back to, again, like what you brought up is the spiritual element of it. I think the point is to like the macro of Remake is not just, oh, like we got to save the planet. I think it is about like literally the function of life itself is at stake, is that, and that's mainly what is sort of hinted at the end of Advent Children, where that version of Sephiroth sort of claims that what Jenova does is that she like corrupts planets and then moves on to the next one. Mm-hmm. And then just keeps hopping from planet to planet to planet. So again, not in the OG at all. That's not what's clear about Sephiroth. Sephiroth wants to become a god, which is a pretty big deal. But it's not about like this corruption of every like inch of the universe. It's way more laid out in the compilation as like what that goal is. So I do think that there is this bigger idea of like, and it may not be 100% different, but it's just getting the context of the compilation and putting it into Remake that's happening. Is that the spiritual battle does not just happen on a small scale, it's everything. Mm-hmm. So
I agree. And I think, something interesting about the way that Jenova and the Cetra are framed against each other in pertinent to the conversation in Remake is that one of the things I noticed, because I went back through and collected screenshots and footage and stuff like that of all the Marlene interactions, and I've been doing in my photo mode stream and stuff like that of base integrate, and the animation and filter that is used in Remake to express Aerith, either giving Red 13 knowledge or what happens between Marlene and Aerith. That animation and filter is identical to the one that Cloud experiences when he's having Jenova flashbacks or flash forwards. And so what it tells me is that mechanically, like these systems use the same kind of mechanism. And what we know of the world system in Final Fantasy VII is that memory is sort of the language of magic. It's like the entire magic base is centered around memory. Limit breaks are memories, like materia are memory. Like the magic's main core component in the universe seems to be memory, and whatever Jenova uses, to corrupt memories or take people's memories and then emulate dead family members and stuff like that, like is described in both OG and in On the Way to a Smile. Like that mechanism seems to be universal now. Like it seems like what they've done is establish that function of magic is not just planetary, it's universal, as shown by this alien force coming in and essentially doing the same thing to this planet, right? So I do think that the purpose of establishing something like that, like a a universal theory of everything is to tie the events of Dirge of Cerberus, or that world system, into the potential end of Remake. And if anything, what Remake seems to be so far, to me anyways, and a lot of people strongly disagree with this, is that Remake is a way to tell the complete story of Final Fantasy VII, including the compilation. And that's the way that I see what they're doing. So I would be really surprised if we don't hear like Omega references by at least game 3 or 4.
On the topic of memory, I don't know how realistic this idea would be, but what would you say to the idea of materia itself having a memory? Because when you think about like the assess materia, granted the materia wouldn't know these things. It's a bit difficult to draw a line between, dude, it's a video game, and this materia has memory. Like you assess something like a summon that happened it created a long time ago, like Shiva, and that materia tells you exactly what it is. It's like, yeah, that it existed forever ago. And I tied this to a second point I was thinking of. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't fully played Before Crisis yet, but in Before Crisis, don't they use materia sort of as like ID cards or something? Their identities are in this materia and they use it to unlock doors and stuff, right?
Yes.
So that, to me, tells me it has some sort of either storage, like a USB stick, or it contains memory of some kind. What if there's... based on, I think we've pretty much eliminated a time travel theory, but if time travel theory is a thing, what if there's a materia in the remake that contains the memory of the original? That could be the white materia or something.
Like holy, the like
right.
Memories of the planet.
You're about to, this is like a huge subject for me. And again, I'm blaming Clark for this. But the concept of memory in Final Fantasy VII seems to be the topic of like, and I'm like trying to dance over, like tiptoe over lasers here. But the idea of materia, let me just address that point, is that Sephiroth explains that it is the knowledge of the Cetra that is what makes materia, which we know is also a part of just the Lifestream. The Lifestream is made up of thoughts, memories, information, recycled souls. It is literally like all of the components of what somebody is made out of, but not just physically. It is also a spiritual makeup. So like everything that we think and feel is also in the Lifestream, and that actively affects just whatever that is. And the maiden who travels the planet, which I'm going to just say because I always have to, is that it's not necessarily perceived as canon, but one of the concepts in it, and this is what I think ties back into what your point is being made, Tsuna, and one of the things that I'm planning on addressing in a bit more detail is that time itself as a construct in Final Fantasy VII's universe is introduced as being made up of memories of the people who are going into it. So rather than it just being time as we know it from Back to the Future or Avengers or anything like that, is it's not a construct of something like we would see in real life, which is like there's a historical accounting. It's more based on your perception of what happened that makes time up, rather than it just being how people usually see it. So rather than it being necessarily like time travel, as many people put it, like my opinion about it is that it's based off of the memories of what has happened, rather than, which is akin to what we were talking about before, which is that's the audience's inclusion, like that awareness of Square of the audiences, is that we're revisiting a property that people have so many memories about and care about deeply. Why not make that a part of the story to a degree? So that to me is 100% where I think they're taking this.
I was kind of thinking there too, like if the live stream is the live stream is the source of memories and stuff, right? But if FF7 Remake's timeline is that things have already happened, which at least I personally sort of believe they have, Cloud and Tifa have been in the live stream and they fixed Cloud in the live stream.
Yes.
So how interesting would it be if there was a materia that remembered Cloud in the live stream and Cloud was like part of this materia?
That would be so dope. I just like that concept of like thoughts and feelings and just all of that stuff being retained in some physical manifestation like a materia. It just sounds like a really cool idea. And
it really matches their storytelling style, like a lot more than some of the more, linear theories that you hear out there. Like this, this blends really perfectly into the concept of sin and Yevon, to the point where they could be thematically related. Again, they're like, that's another one of those Katase things where it's like he accidentally sort of in jest confirmed a connection, and then now we've put so much pressure on them that that they've created this world system that matches it pretty closely.
I would say the same thing. I think that 10 may not be physically the same universe, and I'm sure like whatever you believe in that or how you like formulate your argument for like what Katase said. I do like anytime I've seen anything of 10 just from a storytelling perspective, I'm like, this is just being wholesale reworked to a degree to fit into this same construct of 7 to a degree. I think that maybe Katase might have learned a thing or two about like how he wanted to approach some of the character arcs from that story, and maybe that's one of the reasons why they seem familiar, but that's just speculation.
I really like the concept of the holy materia being the entirety of the previous live stream. Like an entire continuity beforehand in a single materia. That's a galaxy brained idea. We should tell Pez so we can just go off on that for 17 hours.
I was also kind of curious why. I sort of understand lore-wise. Aerith has the white materia, it's in her ribbon, whatever else. It's different to the other materia. You don't really necessarily want to show it off. But when you were in the church and she's like, oh, I have materia too, but it's useless. And then she's like, hey, look. And then points at
a thing you can't see. And you're like, what? What?
I don't.
It does raise questions too, though. Why does she have it? Is there many of this that lots of Cetra had? Or is Ifalna just lucky that she just had this to give to Aerith? This is a pretty powerful materia, right?
Yes.
And wild that she just happens to have it.
Yeah.
In my head canon,
as far as to say that ancient tears could maybe create the white materia.
In my head canon, it's something like that. By the way, in my head canon, Ifalna made it somehow.
I know that there's cut content that sort of explains this, but what I'm talking about is like early concept stuff. So the application to it in this story
would necessarily need to be. I know what you're talking about.
But there is a part of that cut content where it is explained that the use of holy is something that's passed down to Cetra, like from generation to generation. So from the early, if you want to take that as like that's the only like quote unquote lore thing that we have on it, is that seems to have been here as long as
the black materia.
Whatever, right? Yeah. So it's the sort of inverse of that as well, as it's also sort of described. So
I just came up with like this has just come onto the top of my head on the spot here, but
I love it.
There's a specific scene inside the Shinra Tower in the remake where you're in Aerith's bedroom and whispers start flying around her and she says the line, every time the whispers touch me, I lose a little of myself. Something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
So the whispers are tainted by Sephiroth, and Sephiroth is linked with Genova, and that's the whole black materia. So let's assume black materia and white materia, totally opposite. in this new idea that the white materia could potentially be the memories of the original timeline, Aerith remembers everything from the original timeline because she has the white materia, so she's reading it. Marlene gets those flash forwards in the bar because she hugs Aerith and she's got connection to this materia. She gets, whatever. And the Whispers are there to remove any of this information that Aerith shouldn't have because she's not supposed to have this information. So every time they touch her, it's like a virus that's eating at the white materia, losing its memories, and then Aerith's not able to gain those memories from the white materia anymore. That could be kind of cool.
I mean, I
we
think
know Genova. Sorry,
you go.
We know that Genova also would change her appearance to the Cetra to kind of lure them, essentially, to their deaths, more or less. Like she tricked them and manipulated them. So why wouldn't she just, snatch Aerith's memories right out of her brain?
That's
like,
true.
nope,
White materia
have
can
them.
be protected.
That's what you're planning on doing. That's kind of cool. I love that. Definitely a lot of memory-based stuff with Genova too, which is another topic that I've extensively talked about in the part 5 of my video series. Is that a lot of this is applicable to her specifically. This idea of memories. So it's like how interchangeable even those entities are is sort of ridiculous. Like the Lifestream and Genova are almost like, and thinking about how like Sephiroth acts in the future installments of Final Fantasy VII and how Aerith is in the Lifestream with Sephiroth. Like a lot of that stuff is extremely, like they act very similarly. Like their functions are almost the same. So it's a whole thing that those parallels. But I love the idea of like stealing memories from like the party. It's like, these are mine and I'm going to use them now against you.
Ramigus says in chat, it's like, I don't think Ancient's good, Genova bad. It's more of Ancients are people that have to face a bigger threat in the form of Genova. And I fully agree. I mean, I think they're both represented as universal forces. Like Genova's just surviving. It's just it's an organism, and but the thematic interchangeable nature of them, I think really does point to the cycle. Like we're talking about a cycle here. Like at one point, the Cetra, of one planet may have, become whatever Genova is. Like it's so interchangeable that, but I will say that, like, just personally, this stuff, like the Cetra stuff, Genova stuff, was, especially as a kid, was some of the most fascinating lore that I would just think about for hours without having any of the compilation to look at. Or just, like, if I want to see, like, we talk about, like, the value of negative space and not saying too much and stuff like that. I love this stuff. Like, I would die for a compilation title just centered around like Genova coming to the planet. Like I love this kind of stuff personally. I don't know about you guys.
I would also like it.
Wouldn't that be rad? You play as Genova.
Grand Theft Auto or like Hitman. You just are like walking around. Who's in here? And you change into like whoever you just killed. Nobody.
I like to believe the idea that Genova was just an Omega weapon from another planet.
Yeah.
And it had the same job. Their planet got messed up and it was like, well, fuck it, I'm out. And it left, landed on Gaia, and its job is, I need to repopulate this planet with my people, and in order to do that, I need to wipe out everything here. So I'm going to taint the strongest thing on this planet, which is Sephiroth, and he's going to help me achieve that.
Yeah. Yeah, Grand Theft Cetra.
That compilation stuff feeds into that idea with like the Omega, the function of Omega, like going to different planets and stuff like that. It's just all like, yeah. At that point, it's so funny because we were talking about this at the beginning of the stream. Is that it almost feels like there's a rule book somewhere that like how in the Marvel universe, if you play a character, they give you like every single comic book of that character, it's like, this is what your character is. Like, now you can like study it and, act. In Final Fantasy VII, it's the same thing. They just, anybody who's in charge of it is like, these are the rules of the universe. Like, you have to abide by at least X, Y, and Z, and whatever else is fair game. And you can kind of just do whatever. It feels like a lot of this stuff sort of connects to like those sorts of thoughts, is that like what's introduced in AC is sort of depicted in Dirge of Cerberus and vice versa. It all just sort of has like the groundwork for something like interesting that they have like, all these sorts of pieces there for that.
I thought of another thing there too. I feel like this is the sort of thing that could bring up a larger conversation, so it might be the sort of, everybody can go away and think about that in their own time. But the whole idea of the last Cetra and Aerith, taking out Marlene whole thing. Well, in the original game, Aerith isn't the last Cetra. And we actually know that because there's one in the Temple of the Ancients.
So,
and outside of that, right, a comical part is that whenever we learn the black materia is the temple, and, we're going to have to sacrifice somebody to do this, and we all got to get out safely. They didn't once consider that Cetra's feelings, by the way. Like, they were just like, oh, whatever. But wouldn't it be interesting that the fact that this soul of a Cetra is inside the black materia? Like, it compressed, and it's in there. It's in that materia right now.
So, to throw another wrench in all this, too, don't forget the Chocobo Sage.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's still a Cetra, though, Not the Chocobo one, but we know for sure that the one in the materia is, right? Because they say that it is. But whatever they do with that Choco, dude...
I got the impression, I'm not sure if anybody else got this impression. Did you get the impression that was like more of a, I don't want to say hologram, but like that it was a representation of a spirit and not something that was actually corporeal?
It could be a memory.
Yeah, they basically said he's basically got the memories of the Cetra, but he has no way to speak. Only Aerith can understand him from like a telepathic. He's not actually speaking. I think she's like speaking to him the same way she would speak with the Lifestream,
However, though,
in the chat there, what is the Time Guardian? What is it?
Yeah,
I feel like that whole situation is some weird, like kind of like everything that happened with Cloud getting his memories back. I kind of have the same feeling with the Temple of the Ancients, that it's kind of this in between reality and fantasy, like. It's technically real, but it's not physically real. Especially because Cloud literally sinks into the ground to get inside that part of the castle. And then we have, like, when you go in where the rocks come in, like, it's all black, there's nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely asinine. Yeah, you're right. It's what Katase said earlier, like, don't overthink this, or we'll have to make it real.
No, I believe it. I'm with you on this. This black materia thing actually is a huge. Yeah, I love the topic of that. So
I kind of like the idea that we have the power to change the remake if enough of us just believe the same thing.
Okay, guys, we're all gonna hashtag tweet this until they put it in.
I'm sure they'll love it. Their team is like rewriting everything. It's like, burn it all. Can't use it. People will really like it when it comes out in 2026 then.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, 1 year after Grand Theft Auto 6.
That's right.
Oh got a release date. Genova Among Us. That's great. I love it. Okay. I would play an Among Us with Genova. Okay. So I think we've done a pretty good job, I think, solving the whole problem of remakes and stuff. So now's a good time to start the wrap up process on the stream. Meaning, if you guys have some questions, feel free to start putting them in chat, and as you do, if you highlight them, it will create visibility on my end, and I may read it if that's what you want. But if you just want to ask a question and not have it read, I do go through the chats afterwards and just see what I missed, just in case. So I will try and get to you. If you want to do that, that's certainly an option. As we end, though, and you guys collect your thoughts, I did want to kind of ask, like, where... just because you can't avoid this question, and this is the first time that I've had you guys on the show. So this will be like the last time I ask, until next show. Where do you think, we'll start with Lully, where do you think they're going with Remake based on the impression you got? And I've seen you play through, the OG, and I've seen the way that you have analyzed a lot of the details in Remake, and so I know that you have thought about this a lot. And so I want to know, from your informed perspective, what's your big prediction on Remake? What is being achieved by the end of the Remake series?
By the end of the Remake series. So that's tough to say because I know what I want to happen and I know what I don't want to happen. So I guess I should have probably introduced myself with this, but I'm one of the few Final Fantasy VII fans that never wanted them to touch this game again. Right. I kind of agree a lot with Night Sky Prince on a lot of things regarding the compilation, though I do actually like Advent Children and the two novellas that kind of surround Advent Children. I think those are actually really good, despite having a few flaws here and there. But so when I found out they were remaking it, I was kind of like, ooh, I don't know. And then when they said that they're going to make changes, that it's going to be in parts, I was like, ooh, I don't know. But I've gotten to the point where I'm kind of like, I don't necessarily know that I like what you're doing, but I'm here for the ride because it's out of my control and it's my favorite game and I can't look away. So I can't look away. I have to know what you're doing.
That is my favorite answer. Oh my god! Look, I'm here. It's gonna suck.
I am looking respectfully.
It's gonna suck, but I've already put the seatbelt on, so
I'm here for the ride. Basically, so it's hard to say because I'm also one of the people that I would prefer the story, especially before the game came out. I was like, I would rather the story stay as close to the original as possible. Obviously, changes need to be made. Wall Market is a good example. There was no way they were going to be able to do that in today's culture and society the exact same way. It's just not possible. And I actually like the changes, despite the rhythm game kind of needing work. And I actually want them to go in and add a lot of development for more side characters. For example, Barrett in the original game, and I'm bringing this up because I'm also playing New Threat mod, so
yeah,
I might mix up some modded content with official content. But I know that in the New Threat mod, on your way to Coral, Barrett actually stops several times and shows that he's anxious and he does not want to go. And I love that addition because in the original game, you just show up and he's getting reprimanded and, yelled at, berated, whatever. But I like the idea of having more time as the party to watch this character slowly kind of crumple in and be like, please, I don't want to go back there. And I think it's more natural and organic. And those are the kinds of changes I really want. But what I think is going to happen, though, or what I would like to happen based on the way they keep giving us flashbacks, especially of Aerith. I know we keep getting or not flashbacks, but kind of visions of the future. We keep getting these visions, especially as it pertains to Aerith's death. And I would as much as I would rather the stories stay the same, at this rate, I kind of want her to live.
Okay.
Simply because we keep saying we don't want change, like we're going to change fate. And I feel like if you were to say that Aerith is destined to die, it kind of takes away the tragedy for me. It's kind of cheap, and it sucks. Like, I think it's a cheap shot too to be like, oh, we're gonna make you think you can save her just to hurt you more when it happens anyway. That to me would make me mad, because it's gonna hurt. Even if it played out the exact same way, it would still hurt just as much to me, and for new players who don't know. I don't like the idea of like leading people and being like, oh, you can probably save her, maybe, and then they just like brutally murder her anyway. I think that's kind of cheap. But I also know if that were to happen, a lot of people ain't gonna like it. So I don't know for sure if I think they're gonna do that. Along with Zack in the, like, everything we're getting with Zack, right? I personally am leaning more and more towards he's in the live stream, he doesn't know he's dead, and he's going to meet with all the other characters that we think are alive, like Biggs, Jesse, Wedge, and we're going to find out they're actually in the live stream too, and he's going to meet them much like Maiden who travels the planet, and he's going to help fight from the side of the live stream. I think they're kind of giving us this false sense of like, oh, we brought him back. And especially because I think that adds a lot narratively to that scene where, you know, we saw Zack carrying Cloud to Midgar. I think that's from Zack's point of view. I think he personally felt like he was there. He doesn't know he's dead, so he's still carrying Cloud. And spiritually, he was. Cloud was sick. All he knew was like, I need to go to Midgar, and he's dragging his ass there. And Zack's right there spiritually the whole way. And I think that adds a lot of emotion to that scene. So that's kind of what I hope they're doing too. I hope they're like, yeah, Zack's in the live stream, and we're going to kind of see how the live stream works through Zack's point of view, so people who love Zack can spend time with Zack, even though he's dead in this part of the continuity.
I can't agree
stream's
with
over.
what you just said.
Stream's over.
Can't agree with that
Lully
statement
just basically fixed the remake, guys. No,
I completely agree with that.
1,000,000,000%. Yeah, just knocked it out of the park. Chat's going wild. Fully agree. I mean, you're right. They could absolutely do. They can tell this. So we keep talking about how do you tell these on the way to a smile stories and all these. You know, how do we tell the meta narrative? Well, that's how you do it. You have Zack tell the story in the live stream. You know. I fully agree, and yeah, I think we can all go home, but I already promised we shouldn't. And so, what do you think, Tsunamods? And then we'll answer some of these questions.
So, I think that now I know. I'm pretty sure it was stated that there was a lot they wanted to do in the original FF7 that they never got around to doing.
Yeah.
And they're going to use the FF7 remake as the opportunity to give us everything they want. And as a company, there's obviously certain rules they've got to follow. You know, they've got to make money. They don't want to piss us off. They don't want to make too many parts. You know, they don't want to keep making us buy $60 games over and over again. And they've got story to last 10 games, but they got to fit it in, let's say, 3, right? So I think sort of similar to the way Lully says, I think they're going to give us 2 to 3 stories at the same time in the manner of, you know, either different timelines or Zack's dead or, you know, whichever. I do also think that, again, as a company, they're going to play a lot of fan service because fan service wins, right? You give them what they want and they'll keep giving you what you want, which is the money, obviously, but leading us to believe that Zack's alive, Aerith's not going to die, all of that stuff, I think, you know, it's going to let us believe that for as long as possible. Hell, we might even believe it after. There's a scenario in my head somewhere where Aerith does die, but it plays it in such a way where we don't know she's dead, and we keep playing the game in such a way where we don't know she's dead, and then later on it drops on us. It's like, yeah, she's been dead for like 2 weeks. Like, didn't
That'd
you
be
know?
interesting.
You know? Yeah. I don't know. There's a few things I can think of for it, but playing it out that way, I think, is kind of smart because it will eventually lead up to pleasing two crowds instead of one. Like, the fan service people are getting exactly what they want, and the OGs are eventually going to get what they want. Don't change the story, and inevitably, I think by the end credits of the end game of the FF7 remake, we'll end up with exactly what we wanted as originals. It will end the same way. But in the live stream or on a different timeline or something, the ones that did want everything to change will get what they wanted. Because they're giving us two games at once kind of thing. So,
no, I agree with that.
You know, I think it's pretty smart if they do decide to do it in that direction. But at the same time, how much are they going to cut in exchange to do that? Because sure, if you're cutting 10 games down to 3 in order to get all of the content in one and tell us 2 stories at the same time, if they're telling us 2 stories at the same time, then 50% of that disk space is going to a second story that we don't necessarily need or want. So what are they cutting out in order to please both sides? You know, it's a double-edged sword, really.
Condor's gone. No.
It's a game now. Mini game.
Look, we didn't need Junon. We just thought we'd just put him on a boat. That's all that's going to be there when they get there. Just like one little dinky boat. I'll make it over.
And I agree too with what Lully said about like Aerith dying and whatnot. Like, so far it is spoon feeding us Aerith's going to die. Like, Aerith is constantly saying like, you got to get used to death, like don't fall in love with me, and that's normal from whatever else. And you know, one of the big things, like the big impact of FF7, I think, you know, it was one of the first games ever that really hit you hard with the death of a main character. And sure, we're all expecting it in Remake, so you figure it'll hurt less. But will it? Because Jesse, I knew Jesse was going to die. I'm nearly 30. I still cried. I'm not ashamed to admit that. But if you tell somebody every single day until it happens, oh, Earth's going to die, Earth's going to die, Earth's going to die, and then she dies, if you're upset about that, the game's going to be like, the fuck are you upset for? I told you 100 times. So that's why I think that it's going to let us believe that she's either not dead and has been for a while. For all we know, Aerith is dead now. Like, she could be dead the entire time. This could be a manifestation of the live stream. This could be Genova, for all we know, leading us on the wrong track. Genova could shapeshift into Aerith, and Aerith's there telling us, you know, we're breaking destiny, we've got to go do this. I'm feeding you all this information you shouldn't have. It could be a fake Aerith, you know?
Feedback off of that, isn't that kind of the whole idea of Advent Children as well, that like people that you love don't really leave you, they're still with you. That's why when Cloud is like struggling, Aerith comes to help him and remind him she's still there to help him. She says like, let's go, Cloud. Like she has her great gospel, or she like grabs his hand when he's fighting Bahamut. So why wouldn't they lead us to believe she's going to die and then make us think she hasn't, only for her to reveal in the end, like, okay, my time with you is done. I actually have to leave now. I can't, I'm on borrowed time. Like, I think that'd be a good take. I think that'd be a good take if they want to do it that way. Like, because then you get to spend time with her alive for longer, but then the people who think she has to die, they get that too. So it kind of works.
Yeah,
that does work.
I want to almost chime in here just because I think that the concept, because what I've always wanted to look at the Zack moments that we've seen so far as a thematic representation of what happens. But I think with the way that you phrase that particular point, and it specifically comes in with like him carrying him, right? I was like, that is my biggest upset from Advent Children, is that at the end, Zack comes in and is like, hey, like, you can take this guy. Like, you don't, like, you know, what are you letting him, like, throw you around for, essentially? And then, but, like, in that moment, I was kind of like, well, like, Cloud, even though, like, he might have the perception that, you know, he's supposed to solve every problem himself, which is sort of like the lesson he could have learned at the end of the original. It's sort of the point that it's like, hey, like, you don't necessarily get to where you are, even though, you know, you are like a very capable person at the end of OG. Like, you can't do everything by yourself. And then at the end of Intermission, the inverse of Advent Children, like, sort of scenario where, like, when we've talked about this on the stream, I don't necessarily think that I need to go into it necessarily, but like it totally feeds into this perspective of this could just totally just be Zack pre-Advent Children sort of still watching over Cloud. I love that perception of it because I think it doesn't overstay its welcome almost, if I'm going to be honest. As far as the Aerith thing, I want her to die, but I see the arguments being made here that makes sense. It's like, I think it's all just, very effective at throwing us all off of like whatever it is that they're planning on doing, because now it's like what they're planning on doing or what they're setting up for, that could go either way. But
yeah, it could go either way, and there's an argument to be made no matter what, that there was nothing they could do right about it. The emotional impact would be gone just by remaking it. And so, but also how effective is using false hope and emotional manipulation as a tool to, convince OG players that, they aren't being tricked and that the feeling of grief they have is the same. It's never going to be the same. They were kind of in a rough spot narratively with that, no matter what they did. So it's almost like the only way they can do it is kill a different character, which, has its own set of potential fan backlash risks. There's certain characters I think would result in violence if they died. Like, I'm not. Yeah. I wish I was joking about it. I'm just not. I'm not joking.
No, I agree.
Yeah, and so it's like they were in a tough spot for sure. So you guys have been awesome, by the way. This has been a really, really good stream, and so I'm gonna read a few questions that are really good. There's some really good questions that I probably won't read on stream just because they're super boring. There's a Norse mythology. What's my favorite? Most well-deserved vengeance story in Norse lore. Well-deserved. I'd have to think about that, but maybe my favorite is just all of the Ragnarok stuff. Maybe Vidar to Fenrir. Maybe just Odin's son. Yeah, probably Odin's son killing Loki's son. Yeah, that's probably it. Okay, where are you at with Cloud remembering conversations? This is from Ramagus. Where are you at with Cloud remembering conversations between Zack and Sephiroth, where he wasn't present? Do you think that they're implanted memories? Do you think they're false memories to fill in a gap? Do you think that there is some biological Zack influence? Do you think it's just developer oversight and shouldn't be looked at into any further than face value? Right off the bat, I'll say that it doesn't. If you lay it all out at face value, you have to make assumptions in order to make it work. So I would say that we don't have an answer because it could be a mix of all of those things, and we don't know which one of the things does what. Personally, do you have anything to say on that, Sleepezi?
I actually completely agree with what you said. I think that I will say that like the idea of like memories in general is again like something that we've been talking about this entire stream. I've also said in the past that like I think that there definitely seems to be a fair amount of impression that Zack that's left from Zack to Cloud, just in terms of like what he understands of like what we know of Genova cells is that they can kind of implant memories or certain traits of other people onto them, and that's also in the lore of explaining some of Cloud's sort of mental state. So I would say most of it just comes from Zack having him live those events and then coming back to Cloud because of Genova cells. I know that might not be a very well explained answer, but that's my perception of it.
Okay.
I think in the original game, I think Cloud specifically says that he fabricated some of his memories based on stories Zack told him.
He does. He says that exactly. He says that he basically says it's all three of those things. He says Genova, mixed with a persona I created based on memories. Like, so yeah, he like all three functions. That is one of those lines I would like a really solid translation of.
Mhm.
If anybody is listening, Birds of Prey, Birds of Play, help us out. Do you have anything to add, Tsunamods?
I do think that throughout the time that Cloud was Marco poisoned and didn't really have any, he was in a vegetation state. I've always kind of thought that during that whole time when Zack's carrying him around, you're carrying around this vegetated state person. It's got to be pretty lonely. You're going to talk to that person just to keep yourself sane. When you think like they walk, how far did they walk? Where did they come from to get to Midgar? I forget how far exactly it was or where they came from, but during that time, you're going to tell your stories, and Cloud being unresponsive but still conscious, same as in reality. If you talk to somebody in a coma, supposedly they hear it and they remember it. But at the same time, your brain can definitely twist memories. Like, it's like when you remember a dream. Every time you remember a dream, like say you've remembered a dream 10 times in the past. Every time you remember that dream, you're actually remembering the last time you remembered that dream, not the dream itself. And I think, memories are kind of the same. Like, how many times, you would remember something different to, say, like, you and your brother did this exact same thing. You were both at the same party, but you remember it different to him. It's probably because you've tried to remember it more times than he have, and over the course of how many times you tried to remember, your memories alter themselves slightly. So the memories he has of those conversations won't be exactly what was stated, but it's what he remembers Zack just talking to him about, just Zack trying to keep himself sane while dragging him along. Like, even we see that the scene in the truck where they've hijacked and he's in the back and he's like, so what are you going to do when we get to Midgar? I mean, it's obviously a rhetorical question. He's not actually going to go as his job. No. But he's just talking to him because that's what you do, isn't it? And that's the stories. He was like, oh, you should have been there. Even though he was there, he's probably like, oh, do you remember when we were at the reactor and we went inside and we did this cool thing? And, because he was outside. So, I don't know. But I think a general idea works.
I love, in my headcanon, that's now happened. Like, there's there were weeks that went by. Because Nibelheim to Midgar is a jaunt. I think it takes about a year for them to make it to Midgar.
Something like that. I mean, when Zack gets the letters, doesn't he? I think he says something like it's been 8 months.
Yeah.
Or Sung says he has 8 months worth of letters for him.
It's a whole continent. It's probably a whole game. So
they would have gone on a boat at some point.
Yeah. So I just love the idea of him just using Cloud as like an emotional pincushion that can't respond back as he just vomits his thoughts on him. Okay. Here's a really good question. Okay. From Arsomnia. If Square or I think ours may have copied it from somebody else, but because they didn't want it to get lost. Miss Weinrib. Okay, so either ours or Miss Weinrib asked, if Square doubles down on the connections between Ancient, Cetra, and Summons, do you all think it's possible that brand new summons will be introduced in order to expand the lore? And the answer is, I hope so. So bad. I want that so bad. I want to summon Minerva. I want Minerva to just clap the Knights of the Round's cheeks. I want her to be the ultimate summon. Or she can be one of the Knights of the Round. That'd be pretty sweet.
Ooh, yeah.
That's who's standing in the flower beds at the end. All of the Knights
Minerva.
of the Round should have... Dude, if the Knights of the... Oh, dude, that's what happens to Zack. He becomes a part of the Knights of the Round. That's what happens.
He becomes a summon.
He becomes the summon, gathers the people in the live stream. Yeah, dude. He's going to rock out after that.
It'd be cool.
It's to be part of the big boy club.
It looks with the whole memories, Lifestream being memories, materia having memories, summon Zack. It works.
Hey, look at that! It all comes back, one way or the other.
Turns into a summon. That'd be kind of an interesting thought.
They do. Oh no, never mind. I was gonna make a connection to another Final Fantasy. Didn't work out.
Well, so okay, there are some summons in other Final Fantasies that like I feel would be pretty cool in 7. Like Doom Train, for sure. For sure. I would be down for Doom Train. Let's see who else. Eden and Anima. I think those are
Anima.
really...
And I always said Anima, but I don't know if I'm saying it right. That one is like my favorite. It's 100%. Just the design of everything is very nice. Would love that one.
I think one thing they'll largely change with the summons. I do believe they'll add more. I really do.
Uh-huh.
But one thing I think they'll add is that you're going to fight other people that also have summons.
Oh, that would be so cool. Well, they kind of did that a little bit already too, right? With Bahamut,
Yeah.
Which is weird to say.
Well, no, two bosses summon things to you. Like there's both the Whispers and then Bahamut himself summons Ifrit.
Which is the weirdest thing lore-wise. I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
I'm going to tell you something. Sleepezi did not know that Bahamut summoned Ifrit until, what, like 2 weeks ago?
Not even, like less. Like
I think I forgot
You're
that.
beaten too quickly.
I was like, what on earth is this? Like, it's a VR simulator thing, and it's like I was just like, that's just the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
That's
You could've
why I
told me anything.
kind of put it out. I was like, well, that's VR, it doesn't count. But the Whispers do summon. At the same time, that's in the live stream, so is that considered reality? Is that
No,
real
dude,
life?
I don't know. Time is a
Well,
flat circle at this point.
If we consider that the summons are previous Cetra who help protect the planet, they're buddies. Why wouldn't they summon each other?
Yeah,
Like,
dude.
hey, tap in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, come help me out, dude. This guy's giving me a hard
Kick
time.
my ass.
That's so much cooler now. And it's like, oh yeah, they're just bros summoning each other. It's like amazing.
Some of
I'm
the
down.
summons are going to be so interesting, though. With them being party members that sort of walk around and fight with you. Like, Typhoon? That's going to be hilarious.
I'm super down for Alexander. It's like you just fight. Oh, dude, you're just gonna fight on top of Alexander. The whole field is just gonna be
Oh my
a giant
god.
city that you fight on, and then
And
the
that's-
lasers coming in.
And that's just the first Alexander. Once you get like Neo Alexander and Alexander Zero and Alexander Fury and Alexander Sin, it's gonna be nuts, bro. By
I'm excited.
It's a thought.
Hey, just this
thought of
little
getting into a
like,
fight.
skeleton at his cauldron. You just summon this creepy skeleton man. That'll be funny in Remake.
Yeah.
He's just smaller than anything, and he's just like, "Hey, I'm like, oh, okay. Are you gonna
Thought
help?"
of fighting like a regular human being, like a thug from the slums, or just the lowest level grunt soldier, and he's there shooting at you, and he's doing nothing, and you're like, all right, and you just summon a building. Just Alexander just appears. Take my castle.
Literally, just like
I'm
an
not paid
entire
enough for
city
this.
in itself, an entire kingdom just shows up. It's like, I'm good, dude. I'm gonna bounce.
Destroys the
I got a bus
landscape
to catch
around
after
you.
What is this? 3 gil that I stole from you? Just take it.
Sir Sonique said,
Not
"Did you?"
worth it.
Sir Sonique pointed this out, and I almost sent this screenshot to you, Sleepezi. But did you guys check the Alexander Summon NPC talk in Intermission? And there is an ice cream reference for the summon flavored ice cream for
Yes.
Alexander, and that's pretty sweet.
He's in there.
He's
Superman ice cream in Michigan.
oh, what does that taste like?
It's just rainbow. It's the rainbow ice cream. They just call it Superman ice cream.
Okay,
I don't know what it's called in
Skittles.
other. I think it's just vanilla with a bunch of food coloring, to be honest.
What's the kryptonite ice cream taste like?
I
Ice
don't know.
cream.
I didn't notice. They died shortly after.
Well played. Okay, guys. You guys have been great sports. Thank you guys so much.
I'm going to answer
here.
that one question really quick.
Yeah.
That I do think that it is. I'm going to repost it just because I know that it's the whole logo for Final Fantasy VII thing. than the original.
Oh, the little
I
dot?
do think that's. I do think that the only thing that could be is holy materia. But and then again, it's just it could be fucking anything to.
I always assumed it was debris or something, but it could be materia. It's a perfect circle.
That's what always bothered me about it.
Yeah,
because black materia summoned meteor, and it's just representing like here,
a little duality there.
For me, it's 6 half dozen of another. For me, it's either holy or the black materia. I would be satisfied with either answer.
It's that Ifrit and Phoenix logo parallel right there for that 16 coming in at 7. Maybe when Yuzora brings them all together. Okay, so we are going to call it, and this has been incredible. If you miss bits, I will be posting the VOD. Thank you for all your support. I have had alerts turned off, so I haven't seen a lot of the stuff until now, but I have noticed that you guys have been following and commenting and being very supportive, as you guys always are. And I really want you to bring that support energy into my number one raider, the person that raids me the absolute most and most frequently, and that's my very close friend Ryan, the Night Sky Prince. So we're gonna raid him, and I want you all to be very nice, very, very nice. Don't link bdsmtest.org again. I made a mistake by making that recommendation earlier. I apologize. Tatsu, really, it was a mistake.
It ended up being a mistake. So let's not do that to Night Sky Prince, and don't give him too hard of a time about the fact that he's wrong about Remake. Just show him the love that he deserves, because he's been such a good guy, and he's also just like my friend and stuff. So we're gonna raid him.
Guy.
He is. He's a great guy. So we're gonna raid him now. I love all of you. And did you start the raid command? All right. Let's do it.
I could do that. I thought it wasn't even going to go through. I'm a mod. Did you stop it?
Learn something new every day.
I think
it stopped.
Yeah, I didn't stop it. Okay, we're gonna raid. If you haven't raided already, I already have a raid in progress. Okay, let's do it. Let's go. Everybody, click leave raid. Good night.
Bye. I was trying to save you from yourself by talking about Sky Prince. I didn't want him to be. No BD.